The sun sank low over the crimson horizon, and the dry wind carried the whisper of vengeance across the Arizona desert. Every shadow stretched long and thin like a ghost of the past, and somewhere between those dying beams of light rode a woman with eyes that burned brighter than fire. Her name was Ayanna, daughter of the Apache, last of her band, and the desert had made her heart a weapon. She rode a chestnut mare with dust trailing behind like smoke from a dying campfire. Beneath her leather coat a rifle gleamed, and every beat of her heart echoed the same word: revenge. The man she hunted was no ordinary outlaw. He was a cowboy named Eli Ward, the same man who had once led the raid that burned her village to ash. But as she tracked him through the vast silence of the wild frontier, she didn't yet know that the path of revenge would cross the fragile trail of fate. In those first lonely miles, the world was a painting of pain, golden light fading over scarred lands, a woman carrying the weight of ghosts, and a cowboy somewhere out there, unaware that destiny was already galloping his way. Ayanna found his trail near the dried riverbed where blood had once soaked into the earth years ago. The tracks were fresh, and the dust told stories her eyes knew how to read. She dismounted, knelt down, and touched the ground as if it still breathed. The soil whispered of horse hooves and loneliness. Somewhere ahead, Eli Ward was riding with his own burden, a memory that refused to die. That night, when the stars came out like silver scars across the sky, Eli sat by his fire miles away, staring into the flames. His face, worn by years of guilt, told a story he never dared speak. He had been young then, foolish and angry, following orders he never believed in. The Apache raid had changed him forever, and each sunrise since had been a punishment he never escaped. When Ayanna's shadow finally drew near, fate began to weave its cruel design. The first time she saw him, he was kneeling beside a wounded Mustang, whispering calm into the wild animal's ear. It wasn't what she expected. The man who had haunted her dreams wasn't the monster she had imagined. He was older, his eyes tired, his hands gentle. Her heart clenched, confusion cutting deeper than hatred. She raised her rifle anyway, steady as stone, the desert wind brushing her cheek. But when Eli turned his head, and their eyes met across the silence, something inside her trembled. For a moment, the fire of revenge flickered, replaced by a feeling she didn't recognize. He didn't reach for his gun. He just looked at her quietly, as if he'd been waiting for this day all his life. "If you've come to kill me," he said softly, "make it quick. I've been waiting a long time to face a ghost." The words hit her, harder than any bullet. That was the first emotional crack in her heart. The first moment she began to see the man behind the monster. She didn't pull the trigger. Instead, she lowered the rifle, her voice rough as sand. "You remember the fire?" she asked. Eli nodded slowly, pain flashing through his eyes. "I remember everything," he whispered. "And I'd trade my life to change that night." The desert fell silent around them, only the wind moving between them like the breath of old spirits. For a long while neither spoke. Ayanna's throat burned with words she didn't know how to say. The revenge she had carried for years suddenly felt heavier than ever. Before dawn, she disappeared back into the hills, leaving Eli alone with the echo of her presence, and a question that would haunt them both: was redemption stronger than hate? In the days that followed, Ayanna shadowed him from afar, torn between the promise she had made to her ancestors and the strange ache growing inside her chest. She saw him help travelers, mend fences, and ride through storms with a kind of quiet sorrow that matched her own. Each night she told herself she'd finish it, that one shot would end her suffering. But each morning she found herself watching him instead. Slowly, she began to understand that revenge wasn't the cure for pain. It was the chain that kept it alive. The desert around them shifted from a land of death to a stage of destiny, and the air between them thickened with unspoken emotion. One evening, when a sandstorm rolled in fierce and merciless, she found Eli trapped under his horse, blood streaking his leg. Instinct took over before hatred could speak. She pulled him free, dragged him beneath a rocky ledge, and lit a fire against the storm. He was unconscious, fevered, his skin pale under the flickering glow. She tore a strip from her own cloak to bind his wound, and as she worked, she saw the scars on his back, marks of a man who had suffered long after the battle ended. Her heart broke quietly inside her chest. When he opened his eyes again and saw her face through the firelight, he whispered her name as if he had known it forever. That night changed everything. The storm outside howled like the ghosts of their past. But in that small cave, two souls began to find the faintest spark of peace. Ayanna didn't forgive him yet, and Eli didn't expect her to. But somewhere between the sound of rain and the crackle of fire, a strange truth settled. Between them, the line between hate and love was thinner than a breath. The desert no longer felt empty. It felt alive. It felt like a place where even broken hearts could find a second chance. When dawn broke and the sky burned red over the mesa, Ayanna stood watching Eli sleep, her rifle leaning against the wall beside him. For the first time in years, she didn't know who she was without her vengeance. All she knew was that something inside her had begun to change, and there was no turning back now. The desert had brought them together for a reason neither could yet understand. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out, a promise that their journey had only just begun.